Okay, we're just going full send. Lovely technical difficulties this morning, but nothing a reboot won't fix. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Maker That Money, the podcast where we talk about turning your hobby into your jobby. I am Pooch of Repkord. With me this morning, my trusty sidekick, Mr. Andrew Mayhall, supreme leader of the Empire of Sticky 3D Gloop. Andrew, how you doing this week?
Doing great. How are you?
I'm good now. I'm here. We've got our people in the chat who were
Yep.
patiently waited 3 minutes and 50 seconds for us to start. Our loyal people. Good to see you, Grant. Good to see you, Karen, Vicky. Oh my goodness, all my beautiful people. It's awesome to see you guys. It's been a wild week, and once again we catch ourselves going, how is it Friday again?
Yep.
So tell me about all the amazing things you've accomplished this week since we last spoke, Mr. Mayhall.
I feel like it's not been a whole lot.
No?
No,
I mean,
no.
I know it has because I know you, and there's no way that it has. You've been just sitting on your butt. You don't do that.
Yeah. Yeah, no. But no, I mean, it's been a good week, but again, it's one of those things where it's just like we've got deadlines that are fast approaching. I mean, the we 4 weeks and we'll be in Rocky Mountain.
Oh my gosh, is it 4 weeks, a month away from the Rocky Mountain
Yeah,
Rep Rap Festival? Shout out to our guys Justin and his team, Mike, and
Mike and
yeah, the
yeah.
rest of them there. We'll be excited for that. That's in Loveland, Colorado, just north of Denver. For anybody interested, anybody in the chat going to that? Raise your hand. Raise your hand. Show of hands. Show of hands. We hope to see you guys there. We always advocate for going to events, seeing people IRL.
Mhm.
It is like the best. Obviously, networking, giving people who a sense who you are and who your business is, obviously very important. Yeah, that's exciting. Give me some wins. Give me another win for the week, Mr. Mayhall.
Oh, shoot. Got to put me on the spot. I mean, I think win right now is that been slowly working through the backlog here. It's probably to no one's surprise that being a small team here, we can very quickly become overrun with orders and all of the other day-to-day stuff.
And
So
Mongols. Yeah.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah, we had a 500 order queue.
whew.
Um, yeah,
What
that
kind
that
of lead
formed-
time did that create for you?
that was about a week, 5-7 business days, give or take. So slightly more than a week's worth of a time. But we're now into more manageable territory. There's still like a 2 or 3 day backlog, but
Okay. Okay. All
yeah.
right. I feel like it's been a fantastic week for me, just like in life balance. I got a trip up to the mountain for those who
Fun.
may not be aware, I live pretty close to Lake Tahoe, and I've done a few snowboarding trips already, and my partner took me up for a late birthday trip. We went to Kirkwood, and I always love that mountain. It was beautiful. It was a bluebird day. So that was like kind of took Monday and did that. Kind of recentered, got wholesome, got back into the shop, started catching up on some fab work, got the lasers fired up, was cutting, was printing. The printers are humming away. I don't know if you can hear them, but they're humming away in the background. So we're making stuff. A lot of conversations, a lot of good phone calls with people, and
Awesome.
ideas flowing. So it's been good. And surprisingly, I'm on a no coffee challenge with my good friend Clayton from Uncle Jesse from For Real channel, and it's been 8 days. And I've done this before. I mean, Andrew, you've been with me on this ride, and he's like, "Oh,
Yep.
Pooch is off the coffee again," and yeah, we'll see. But it never sticks. It never sticks because I just love it too much, especially in the winter. My warm cup of coffee in the morning. But I've been okay, and honestly, I can. My goal is just have an even energy throughout the day. So I was having
Hmm.
problems where I was falling asleep like 3, 4 in the afternoon. I'm dying. All right, I
Needed
gotta
a
take
nap.
a nap. I gotta take a nap. And I'm a fan of. I advocate for, hey, whatever works for you guys. Power nap, 20-minute power nap. Like I'm a big fan of that. If you need it, take it. Like recenter, because otherwise you're just bashing your head against stuff, like not really going anywhere, and the hours are floating by. Like sometimes it's better to take 20 to invest in the next couple hours of the day.
Mm-hmm.
That's just me. But I will say it's been better. But I feel like I've lost my turbo button. And I know I talk really fast and I get excited and I do my Italian gesticulation and all that stuff on here because I'm energized when I'm talking to my people. But when I'm just running around in general, it's like that caffeine boost. I mean, there's something to it. I mean, obviously it
Yep.
works. It works for a reason. But
Yep.
so the question in the chat for you guys is are you better off having that sustained energy throughout the day or having your bursts when you need it for just like completely manic productivity? What do you think? Andrew
I'm,
thinks as he takes
I
a
mean,
sip
I'm a
of his
caffeine addict. Like,
his bean water. Yeah.
I just have a caffeine drip going all the time.
Well, half of the challenge and half of the reason I feel like it's a win is like a lot of times just to see if I can. I don't like the idea of being dependent on anything, and
Mm-hmm.
I've yet to like really fully quit it. Yeah, I'll go like a month without, and then I go back and whatever. So we'll see.
Yeah.
I think there's a it's like everything. It's like drinking or anything. It's like a balance. Like one here and there is fine. It's when it becomes too much of a dependency or something where I'm like, oh my gosh, I drank like a pot of coffee today. That's a bit much. Then I'm like, let's dial it back, right? So I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, Clayton got me going on it. I think he's a week or two ahead of me, and he says he doesn't even think about it anymore. It's amazing how like
Yeah.
ritualistic it becomes where it's like, oh,
Oh
you're
yeah.
craving it. I thankfully I don't really get the headaches. Like I've had a little bit of that, but not much. So
Mm-hmm.
anyway, but this isn't coffee talk. This is Maker That Money, where we talk about business and making and
All
hopefully,
the fun things.
yeah, all that fun stuff. Today on the pod, we're going to talk about venturing into the unknown,
Mm-hmm.
exploring new worlds. I mean, it's like I feel like play the Star Trek theme or something right here at the beginning, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Karen, I can drink tea. I do have some tea here. Unlike Ted Lasso, as much as I like the notion of calling it garbage water, I actually like a lot of different teas. And so sometimes like just that habit, it's my nicotine patch in the quitting process. But yeah, I've got a nice chai tea here, and which means I guess means tea because chai means tea and in Indian culture. So, but
Oh no.
it's nice. I put a little oat milk in there. It's good. So I guess there's a like a little bit of caffeine, but it's nothing like coffee. Black tea is very mild. I know I could do other stuff. I can't. Here I go on the coffee again. You're letting me take Andrew, rein it back in for us.
You just like talking about coffee, like.
Welcome to our new Coffee Talk podcast.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, when are we gonna start rolling out the coffee sponsorships?
I know. Not sponsored. That would be nice, but then if I'm trying to quit coffee, can't get a coffee sponsor. We need a
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
this show sponsored by Bigelow Teas. I'm just in a digression hole. Venturing into the unknown. That's what we're going to talk about
That's what
today.
we're talking about.
Exploring new worlds, and that can mean a number of different things as makers, and it can be
Mm-hmm.
pretty scary for a lot of people. I mean, let's be honest, Andrew.
Sure.
I mean, we
Sure.
avoid the unknown for very good reason, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
it's an uncontrolled environment, and we
Mm-hmm.
as makers, as scientific individuals, we like the known, we like the predictable,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So
Oh,
why
sure.
on earth would we advocate for
Mm-hmm.
venturing into the unknown?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, I think really there's a bunch of different ways in which we can kind of fragment and go down different paths. One of the more interesting things that I think we should talk about when it comes down to the business side of things is basically building out your charts of known unknowns, known knowns, unknown unknowns, and unknown knowns.
You love
I know
saying
that's a
that.
lot of that's
Do
very
that. Do that one more time slower, if you would. The
yeah.
known
So
knowns.
yeah, no, well, I mean, known unknowns,
Yeah.
known knowns,
Yeah.
unknown unknowns, and unknown knowns.
Okay, what does all that mean, man?
Well, I mean, in business, right? There are always things that we're going to be challenged with. So let's say, for instance, we know for a fact that we're going to be thrown challenges that we can't predict along the way. So we would classify this as a known unknown. Like we know that something is going to come our way at some point that
Yeah.
we can't predict fully.
Yeah.
So, what's the opposite of that? Well, we also know that there are things that we're certain of. So these are known knowns. We know that X, Y, or Z will happen because of, A, B, and C. These are things we can predict because either the path or the trajectory we're on. Well, what's the opposite of our known knowns? Our unknown unknowns. So these are things that we don't
Like our
know that we
quadrant.
don't know.
Okay.
Exactly.
Get the
So
whiteboard out and draw the quadrant. Okay, good.
yeah. So what are our unknown unknowns? Like these are things in which we can't even possibly predict. Maybe think like like crazy weather patterns or something like
Baseball
that.
hail hitting your house and
Exactly.
destroying things. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, things we can't
Weather
possibly
phenomenon.
predict,
Okay.
and we have no idea that they're coming. An
Okay.
asteroid attack, like a hit or something. But in business, it could be the entrance of a competitor.
Sure.
Now one could say it's like, oh, well, maybe that's a known unknown. We know, like at some point, that someone may enter, but the way in which it happens, or there could be
Or the
caveats to it.
when. Sure.
Mhm.
Sure.
And then we have our unknown knowns. So this is one of those crazy things. Others
How
know
do I know
about
what I
it,
don't
but we
know?
don't know about it.
Oh, the things that are
So
happening in the closed doors behind the scene.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is that insider trading knowledge, if you will.
Interesting.
So I think that in terms of exploring the unknowns in the facet of business, it's really about getting to know what it is that you're doing and the trajectory that you're on and the planning that you're making, so that those unknowns, those things that we don't know can start to kind of coalesce and turn into the other categories, the two other primary categories, those known unknowns and those known knowns. God forbid we have other unknown knowns where other people know that we're heading for a brick wall and we don't even see it ourselves.
Yeah.
But in many cases, that also happens, especially in the maker entrepreneur world.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I keep thinking you're saying unknown gnomes, and I'm like those gnomes that are out on my
yeah,
neighbor's lawn.
yeah,
It's but this is, I don't know. It's like chaos theory of entrepreneurialism or whatever. But we talk about the unknown. It's a big scary thing. We want to control variables. A lot of times, you know, we're such a contradiction in that a lot of times we're like, oh, you have to focus, and we're talking about focus and like the almost the opposite of these things, like the boring stuff, the rinse and repeat. That which is predictable will become profitable.
hmm
I mean, that's kind of the pattern that we've known and experienced, but the neurons that fire the act of exploration and what that does, and to get you to another place, to allow you in a lot of ways, to me it's about exercising some flexibility in your mind, so that when the inevitable time to have to pivot or change course comes, it
hmm
won't feel as uncomfortable, if that
Yep.
makes sense. And
hmm
I think, you know, I I don't know where you fall on this,
hmm
but I would say that given enough time in your life, in your business, whatever, these unknown unknowns, all these unknown variables are going to come in, and the market itself will
hmm
change. And we talk about the power of having to pivot and all that stuff. And so by flexing these muscles, and maybe in just like a little practice form. So, for me, I look at venturing into the unknown to mean like, you know what? Let's try this product out and see how it does in the market, right?
Sure.
And you have to look at what the stakes are.
hmm
You're moving against any attention that you're taking away from your primary thing is going to be a
Sure.
distraction from your core, money making.
hmm
But what is the benefit of having some preparation, exploring new avenues that you might not have otherwise considered? Who knows where that road will actually take you? It may take you to an even better place, and you may say, you know
hmm
what, this is a better place to focus. When you're first getting started, I would argue in this business, there's a lot of we hear the term like, throwing stuff against the wall and seeing what's going to stick, right?
hmm
Well, I don't know if I would advocate for something like so scattershot.
Sure.
Maybe picking a couple different things or whatever, but going through that exercise, you've heard the phrase like you gotta sometimes the juice isn't worth the squeeze. You heard that
Yep.
phrase before.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge with that is like you have to squeeze in order to understand how much juice you're going to get, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yep.
it's not always clear immediately the amount of juice that you're after. And so going through this exercise and doing the squeeze is what allows you to make that analysis of like, yeah, that was worth it, that wasn't.
Mm-hmm. Oh no,
The
absolutely.
key is putting the guardrails on that whole thing, so you're not just constantly squeezing everything, jumping all over the place and whatnot, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely.
So for somebody who's getting started in this, who doesn't really, hasn't made a name, hasn't built a brand and all that stuff, like what is your approach in terms of like what percentage of your time you might want to advocate for
Mm-hmm.
like business development, exploring new markets, stuff like that, versus staying the course, the traditional,
Sure.
whatever the
Sure.
initial hypothesis was, right? Because it's just a series of hypotheses that I feel
Yeah.
like we're constantly exploring here.
So I mean, if I were to try and break it down, something that I did in the early days of Gloop, was before we even had decided to turn it into a business, anything else was, basically kind of determine whether or not this was an actual problem. And so that was kind of venturing out and getting data, doing data collection.
Yeah.
That was 100% of my time for several months.
Mm.
That's all I did.
Doing your homework. Yeah. Research.
Yeah, exactly. Is basically research. I mean, venturing into the unknown, in many cases, if you're you could basically equate it to doing research, doing data collection, doing you're exploring.
Yeah.
And there's no, like, there was no expectation. I think I should say, like, I didn't have an expectation for this venture at the start, simply because if you start having these like expectations, or if you're looking for a specific outcome, then you're almost guaranteed to find that specific outcome.
Mm.
Which is a whole different challenge in itself, is how do you make yourself not biased? Looking at data sets and trying to figure out what it is that you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Once I started getting some of that information, that's where things started shifting. It's like, okay, well, I've kind of ventured out a little bit to the unknown. I've got some data. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to, kind of refactor, readjust. I would say that, at that point, after getting the data, it was probably maybe spent 10%, less than 10%, going back out, doing more research, mainly because it was like, okay, I think I've got something.
Right.
Let me go and let me go and refine it, get it a little bit better, and then I'll go back out. And so I think in many cases, for all business, it's going to be these cycles. You're going to want to find your like a good cadence on what it is to basically try and have a new project going, or try and have that next product that you're working on iterating. But in many cases, it's all going to start with the research and that initial hypothesis, but focus on learning, not focus on trying to prove that you have a good idea, I think, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. There's part of me that wants to apply like 80-20 rule to this, but the problem is the percentages are going to be so variable depending on where you are on the path, right? And
Yeah.
so when you're first getting started, it's all exploration, right? Because it takes walking the path to like really understand not just what's viable, but like there's so many issues. It's viable in the market? Is it viable for you, your sanity, your expertise, the resources you have, the finances you have, that kind of thing?
Yep.
So it's it's interesting when you're trying to give insight. Like this is like everything we talk about. It's going to be a very personal journey. When I know when you got started with Gloop, like you actually had more offerings of Gloop early on, and you
Mm-hmm.
made the decision to cut some of
Mm-hmm.
those things.
Yeah.
And I've done similar, not just with stuff I've produced, but with stuff I resold and
Mm-hmm.
things like that, where it's just like, reselling I think is a little bit easier because there's pretty clear math in terms of like, does this sell? Does it not? Who else is selling it? What kind of competition is there?
Sure.
And can I get more margin if I invest my capital in other things? When you're
Mm-hmm.
manufacturing, uh, it can be really costly to like spin up that stuff and check the market,
Oh yeah.
and sometimes you don't even know like if you've gone far enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you have to accumulate a critical mass of awareness and all these other things, and that comes easier the longer your brand has been out there, the bigger your audience is, that you can try new
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And so you may be giving yourself bad data
Mm-hmm.
sometimes by
Oh,
like
sure.
not seeing it through long enough, or you might
Mm-hmm.
have hit a fad, and
Yeah.
it was like you're like, oh, this is great, this is all fidget spinners comes to mind. Like think about how many people were like making fidget spinners and all this stuff, and
Yeah.
we don't talk about those anymore. And so there's a lot of analysis that has to happen, a lot of potential pitfalls along the way as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, one of the other interesting aspects is being. I think makers, we have this really cool ability to kind of visualize what it is that we're wanting to do in the most perfect light.
Mm.
Like we have this oversimplification normalization aspect of our brain
Yeah.
always on high alert.
Right.
But also at the same time, like we can be really really good at venturing into that unknown,
Hmm.
because of the data that we were seeing. It's like, well, hey, I've got this widget and this widget. If I combine the two, I can create something else entirely,
Sure.
and that's got to be valuable. And then we start that whole exploration process ourselves. Is like, well, immediately we're like, let's turn it into a business.
Yeah.
In many cases.
Yeah.
So I think that there are some really interesting aspects to being a maker that make venturing into the unknown, that first step, a lot easier. But also at the same time, in it now, if we look at, like, let's say a scientist, someone who has to basically document and come up with processes on how we do our research, how we collect our data. In this way, we're being a lot more methodical into going into that unknown,
Mm.
and basically generating that data, or capturing that unknownness
Yeah.
and turning it into known factors.
Yeah.
So we're doing this research. I think for many that are just interested in a business idea or venture that they have, is you need to challenge yourself to sit there and think about all of the other aspects that go into this business. So for instance, you'll have your accounting, you'll have all of these other you'll have legal things. These are all completely potentially unknown to you. And
Sure.
so in this scenario, we're venturing into a category that you don't know but others know.
Yeah.
And so these are those unknown knowns.
Yeah.
Like, so we're learning ourselves.
Yeah.
And in many cases, it's actually easier to start there because others can help you out.
Yeah.
Others have gone and walked that path, and they can help guide you.
Yeah.
You know,
I almost wonder if a common trait amongst entrepreneurs is like a healthy sense of or an unhealthy sense of indifference.
yeah.
Like going in with a naivete that
Hmm.
that honestly would allow most people to talk themselves out of doing something, right?
Hmm.
So you bring up accounting, you bring up legal. I know nothing
Hmm.
really. I mean, I know enough to operate my business and stuff, but I'm not an accountant. I'm not a lawyer,
Hmm.
despite what you guys think and my vast knowledge of bird law. Um, that those things, if I started getting into the weeds on that too early on, it probably would have like allowed me to talk myself out of like doing it,
Hmm.
right? And so going in with like, I will call it a healthy naivete is
Yeah.
an important part of entrepreneurial, because it's like I will cross that bridge when I get there. I can figure these are all solvable problems. We can
Mm-hmm.
look to our contemporaries, to our predecessors, and say, I'm not the first one with this problem, and this is a solvable problem. Let's do
Mm-hmm.
what we do well. Let's
Yep.
get what I'm excited about out there. Let's use this energy, get that flywheel turning, and when when it becomes an issue, then we can cross that bridge. You bring up legal as a great example of that. As you get
Mm-hmm.
started, there's really not a lot. Maybe you could hire a lawyer to help with the
Yeah.
foundation of the business. You don't even need to. So
Nope.
spending the time to do the research and stuff. Worrying about the fact that you might get sued for liability and all this stuff, like those are issues that really only crop up once you're successful. And so
Yep.
hopefully, not always, but by the time you get to it being a real problem, you have the resources and the ability, and hopefully the mental stability to cope with it. And you brought up something that sometimes you can wear it as a badge of honor, right? Because it's like anything that's
Yeah.
successful enough at some point
Mm-hmm.
will find competition, and typically somebody's going to
Mm-hmm.
sue you, right? So you wear it
Yep.
as a badge of honor, that hey, my first lawsuit because
Yep.
um, you know we must be doing well enough for people to think that I have money to go after. Completely ludicrous outlook on the whole thing, because it's a stressful thing. Don't get me wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be sued. It's a massive time suck and an energy suck more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
But again, the point is, like, you don't necessarily have to worry about. You can't play too much chess. You can't play too
Mm-hmm.
many moves ahead, because you're gonna end up stunting your desire to go. I mean, there's a reason the Shia LaBeouf meme of "just do it"
Mm-hmm.
exists.
Oh yeah.
Just getting started on the path like allows you to get a drive and a commitment that you need.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're advocating for venturing into the unknown repeatedly, because it's not just like from the jump. There are going to be multiple steps along the way where you might need to pivot. You might need to, strain some aspect of what you're doing to get to a better place.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I don't know.
Well, one of the other interesting things I've been going through this process recently on learning to master new traits and abilities. Thinking in the terms of a craftsman instead of trying to focus on one area of my life and be really good at that. I wanted to kind of broaden these aspects, various different challenges that I've faced personally. And these are all completely unknown to me, but if we look at it in the eyes of a craftsman, someone who has is a cabinet maker, woodworker, whatever they might be, they are constantly pushing themselves to get better.
Hone their
They're
craft.
honing their craft.
Yeah.
And so as they continue to progress, they are trying new ways of doing something they've done before, but in again a different way. And I think going through the exploration process on diving into these unknown areas, it allows you to actually think about the things that you've currently been doing in a different light, in this different way. For instance, like we have been making and pushing towards our retail packaging. We finally released it after years of work, and I had always thought the only way to make a particular part of this was this specific way, because all of the experimentation that we've done up to that point has resulted in basically failure. And it wasn't until I took a step back and decided to just kind of go and explore in a different tangent entirely on a different process, not for manufacturing this part but a different part, that I had that aha moment. I was like, well, wait a second, this is something that I can actually use for that part over there. And had I not gone through that exploration process of exploring how to manufacture something else entirely for a new upcoming retail packaging piece, for a different product entirely, I wouldn't have actually figured out, like, well, wait, we could actually use the same process over here. So in many cases, it's this process of, in the craftsman mindset, it's this way of basically challenging yourself to become better at what you're doing, but it's also opening and broadening your basically your tool set, uh,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and the things that you can do.
Well, I have a question for you, but before I do
Hmm.
that, let's engage with the audience here for a second. I want you guys to think about something if you're listening right now and in the chat, and allow me, you know, this moment here. If you would share something that you've been putting off doing for a while because it feels scary or hard or it's
Hmm.
going to take you a long time. Like, what are the things? Because I think this is a good exercise because we all probably have 20 of these things. It can be completely not business related and stuff, but I think it's a good exercise to just stop and think like, what are these things that I'm avoiding and why am I avoiding it? And my
Hmm.
question for you, Andrew, is, you mentioned as a scientist, you take a very
Hmm.
analytical, data driven approach. How much of this is personality dependent?
Hmm.
Right. Like, so we talk about entrepreneurism, like entrepreneurialism. That's tough to say,
Hmm.
guys. Uh,
It's a
and
mouthful.
a common thread of like having some amount of risk aversion, right?
Hmm.
It's or low risk aversion, right?
Low risk aversion.
Right.
Hmm.
Um, you kind of have to be a little bit
Hmm.
willing to you have to be a lot of bit willing to take on some risk
Yep.
on the scheme of things. So again, when we talk about like personality dependency, though, it doesn't necessarily mean like you don't have to be a scientist, you don't have to be good at analyzing
Sure.
data.
Hmm.
But obviously what works for you isn't necessarily going to be what works for
Hmm.
me or the next person and whatnot. And so what what is it that we need to focus on an individualistic basis, if that makes sense, to get the tools that we need to venture out into this unknown?
Well, I think the biggest thing is it's just taking the first step. It's the
Like that
starting
that that's
problem.
stepping off the high dive
Uh-huh.
movement.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And I mean, in some ways, there are ways in which we could, reduce the anxiety that comes from taking that first step.
mm-hmm.
Whether it's if we use the high dive example, it is basically taking a step off from ground level into the pool. And
Yeah,
then, maybe it's taking the step off from the little kiddie, board
yeah,
into the pool,
yeah,
and slowly working our way up to taking bigger and bigger steps.
yeah,
But in many cases, I don't think that it has to be. We don't have to see the unknown as this big daunting thing. If we can find ways and to break it down into smaller, more digestible chunks. Alex here actually brings up, about putting off hiring employee number one. I mean, this is something that I've actually had, issues with as well.
yeah.
Not necessarily putting it off, but knowing like the person that I hire, I've got some responsibility to them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I've got to make sure we've got work for them. There's a lot of unknowns there.
It changes the stakes dramatically, right? Because it
Mhm.
takes a
Yeah.
lot of elements out of your control. And
Hmm.
it puts a lot of fear in you in terms of like, am I going to be able to continue? Because I take hiring serious. It's completely different from like, and maybe the dipping your toe in is like,
Hmm.
can you do seasonal labor? Can you do like other? There are ways to do
Exactly.
that. I was really resistant for a long time as well because I was just like, oh, the admin of that. Like, I got to figure out payroll. I got to figure out workers' comp. I got to figure out all these things that I didn't need to do as a sole proprietor or a single member, LLC or
Hmm.
whatever the structure you might have is. Um,
Hmm.
it's a really really common one on the employee front. So what
Hmm.
was it for you personally? Like you'd mentioned a couple of them, but talk more about
Hmm.
that.
Well, yeah. So I mean, the bigger thing is like for me, it's a little bit deeper than just the employee. It reason why we haven't hired employees because all of Gloop is still run out of my personal house, and it's hard to hire people to come in and work inside your house. Now, I mean, we've done family, we've done friends, and kind of dipping my toes into it is basically setting them up as contractors. They're not employees, but it's a way in which it's like, okay, hey, you have a responsibility, you come in, you do these work, and then you get paid for it.
Yeah.
But the bigger thing I think for me was the need to eventually get our own place. As things continue to grow,
Yeah.
we should have got our own place a long time ago.
Sure.
But now it's like, it's a bigger thing to take on, but there's a lot of other things that kind of went into this. Now it's going to enable me to hire employees.
Yeah.
you know it's going to enable me to start growing more rapidly, get equipment that I need, all sorts of stuff. But I think one of the biggest diversions in general is just the unknown of, like, okay, well, I could go lease a space, but then now I'm beholden to a landlord. And like, if I need to do modifications to said building, it's like at some point I have to leave those behind.
Yeah.
All sorts of things.
Yeah.
So
Well, there's a million reasons why not to do stuff,
mhm,
and until we actually venture in. And you mentioned an interesting uh, progression, because there's a big domino effect. The higher, a lot of us are coming from a garage or
mhm,
basement or wherever, and so it's a massive double whammy. So it's a whammy to take on a dedicated space where your overhead shoots up
mhm,
phenomenally, like double,
mhm.
triple sometimes, right? Because now you're having to pay, uh,
Yep.
you know, uh, separate insurance and utilities
Utilities, yeah, all of
and
it.
rent and all kinds of other stuff. And then so that's like a big light. You think about your life change events.
Mhm,
You get married, you have babies, you buy a house, and all that stuff. Like, these are business life change events.
mhm,
So to take on not just like the big life change of like getting out of the garage and getting into the space, that's a big
mhm.
change. And then
Yep.
to like immediately hire on top of that, that's another. It's just like basically going from single life to married to with kids in buying a new house, like all at the same time. And that is a recipe potentially for just like massively
Mhm.
overwhelming yourself, right? Because you've just
Yeah.
like shot your expenses up like 10, 20x, the
Mhm,
responsibility, the stress. To me, a lot of it was more like the managerial component, um like, I don't say like the lack of freedom, but it's like, yes, when you have people there, you need to be there to manage them.
mhm.
And
Yeah.
you don't get the luxury of just like, oh, you know what, I'm gonna work late tonight, and then I'm gonna get up and I'll start late, and I'll go in, and like, you lose a lot of that like
Sure.
sole owner benefit that we kind of come to
Mhm.
know and love. It
Yep.
creates a different responsibility, just like having kids does. Like, you're not working on your own schedule anymore. You're working on the company's schedule, and so
Mhm.
that's a scary thing, and rightfully so for a lot of people. So my point in all of this is that, as I've said before, it is a journey of introspection
Mhm.
in understanding like the who you are and what works for you. And it's not
Yep.
to say that there aren't solutions. Like, just because it doesn't work for you, if you have a partner that is great at that stuff, and
Mhm.
they can pick you up they can be there from 9 to 5, and you can be the one that travels, or whatever other benefit that you bring. Like, there are plenty of solutions
Oh,
to it.
yes. Mhm.
But you do need to be honest about yourself, and creating a plan and a workflow.
Mhm.
I don't know, thoughts on that, and then I want to comment on something in the chat.
Yeah, I mean, for us, coming up here soon, we're going to be making some big changes. And that's one of those things where I'm right now challenging myself. It's like, well, the only way to continue growing in many cases here is to actually make these changes. Like, I've spent the process or the past year or so in the process of basically gearing up for these big changes.
Yeah.
Doing exploration, changing the way we do our accounting, changing the way that we are paying, certain things, getting more in line with, things to expect. Trying to nail down the unknown unknowns, and convert some of those to more either known unknowns or known knowns, more ideally.
Sure.
Um,
I
you
mean,
know,
is that the goal? To just convert as many unknowns into knowns? I mean, that sounds like a
I
silly
mean,
question, but
I think so. I think that and again, in many cases, if you look at all of these other examples, whether it's taking the craftsman approach, to basically honing your craft and mastering it. Or, if you just look at just general business development, we are always about converting the unknown into a known.
Mhm.
And because in that process of conversion, that change, that's where the opportunity lies.
Mhm.
That's where we can develop that new product that, solves problems for people. That's where we can really take advantage of our position in the marketplace. That's where we could, basically build our entire business around. And once it's fully converted into a known and becomes a repeatable process, that's how we can then manage that process, and we can convert that into, very large revenue generating machines,
Sure.
if done correctly.
Yeah. I
So,
mean, you make a good point. Like the the thing that we're glossing over, discounting, like we're not looking at the positive side a lot of times. Like like I said, there's a million reasons not to do it. Alex brings up one of the things
hmm
that I feel personally too. It's like I don't want to be on my best behavior. I don't want to feel like I have to be on and professional and managing all the time. Um, and uh, and that's understandable. But like the upside, like you can only go so far with
hmm
just you in just your shop. So if you want to grow, if you want to be
hmm
honest about what this wants to be, you can have a perfectly good lifestyle business. You can do. There are plenty of very very successful solopreneurs out there,
hmm
and that is a perfectly reasonable choice. I would
yep.
I would I would say that. So we talk about
hmm
product and stuff a lot because it's like what we've known most. But
yep.
the other thing I want to point out and talk about in the chat, Karen and Vicky both mentioned like they would like to do more streaming and they're resistant.
hmm
So like thinking about content creation, whether
Sure.
it's because you want to be a content creator or if you just want to hone your marketing and your advert, it's a great way to engage with your customer and all of this stuff. Like I deal with creators all the time, and it is a very viable
hmm
business. There are people that are very great at it, but it's a tough one too. It's really competitive. A lot of people
Sure.
like the idea of doing it, but realize that it's a lot of work and it's hard. But just in the context of streaming and the resistance to that, I can appreciate it because, like Alex is talking about here, for me, for a lot of streaming isn't about like the technical aspect of it. It's like, yeah, I can set up a camera, put some lights up, and fire up OBS and be streaming in no time. But it's like to be on to do this. Like part of
hmm
the reason we chose to do this time slot for us is like I know that I just have more energy at the beginning of
hmm
the day. If I start the day with something like this that allows me to focus on it and not get dragged into all the other minutia that
Sure.
are just going to make me feel worn out at the end of the day.
hmm
So I would advocate for whatever you're trying to unexplored thing you're trying to explore, like create a workflow that is going to like work within who you are and minimize the change of inertia for you. So
hmm
for example, um, you might be putting off, well, I don't really have a great camera. You hear this all the
hmm
time.
Sure.
I don't have good audio gear. Like you come up with these like excuses to not do it because you don't feel like you have the equipment. And the truth
hmm
is, like, you can be streaming on the cheap so easily, right?
hmm
And I know that we have a pride, especially if you're a designer or something like that. It's like you
Yep.
want the appearance to be good. You want to have a good set, all this stuff.
hmm
But the problem is if you go through all the things that you want to do, you're going to have to compromise. You have to be honest with yourself.
Yep.
And if it's going to become more work, like if you create a set that is
Yep.
in your living room and you have to clean the living room every time in order to like set up to stream and all that stuff, you are not going to stream more often because you're like, I don't want to clean the living room right now. So
hmm
having a plan to create that dedicated space to just be like, you know what, I don't need the nice camera. Like my little webcam will be fine.
Yep.
Because at the end of the day, uh, people like there's a minimum, and there's plenty of writing about this online. Like there's say focus on audio first because if people can't hear you or if it sounds
hmm
unpleasing to the ear, that is more disruptive than the visual component.
Yep.
But my point is that If you make it easy to just press go, like make it as push button as possible, as turnkey as possible, like you're going to
Mhm.
get rid of all those reasons not to as best as you can. Like have a space that you can, even if it's a
Sure.
tiny corner somewhere that you just can keep, and everything else can be junked around it, but like that never, you never mess with that so that you know you can always go in and stream. Like that's a great way to do it. Liz brought up a great point too. Like if you want to dip your toe in, finding ways to dip your toe in to see how you
Mhm.
feel about streaming, collaboration. Like be a guest on other people's streams. There's always there's a lot of people out there that are happy to have conversations like this,
Mhm.
and it changes the dynamic and the engagement of the whole thing as well too. So
Oh,
there are
absolutely.
plenty of baby steps that you can take, but definitely remove all as many of the reasons not to as possible. If you have the baseline gear, like just start doing it, and
Mhm.
don't wait until you can create a perfect thing to start doing it, because you can
Sure.
hone your craft as you go. It's fine. And it doesn't
Mhm.
matter if you only have a few people tuning in. Like you have to be committed to the process.
Yep. No, exactly.
So how does that so we talk about content creation, like so going back into business, we talked about hiring, we've talked about getting a studio. What are other business considerations that there's you think there's a lot of resistance to going into the unknown on? What's the what's the next big one, do you suppose?
I mean, for me,
Yeah.
it's marketing.
Mm.
It's
Why is
paid
that?
advertising and marketing. Um, that's one of those things that we've never really done before. We've done a few sponsorships now. I've got a few of those under my belt. That was, kind of a big scary thing at first. Working with content creators directly, but also now moving into the aspect of doing paid advertising on Facebook, Instagram, all of those various places that you would typically see, sponsored paid advertising slots for. Um, y- you know, we have taken this really organic approach to our growth all the way up to this point. And now to kind of change that seems like it's rocking the boat.
Mm.
It's been working so far. Like, with sales, everything, our growth has been incredible. But at some point, we will potentially hit a plateau. While we haven't hit it yet, wherever that plateau is at some point it's bound to happen. You can't have constant sustained 20 to 50% growth month over month every single month from now until eternity. Um, but it's like how do we start looking and exploring these other areas that I for one don't have the slightest clue on establishing an audience inside a Facebook Marketplace, or an Instagram, or how much money we should be spending, what the creatives should look like, all of the messaging, all of the marketing materials. Like, that's
Yeah.
all new.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
you know Maybe it's just in aspect of our business, like 3D Gloop, but at the same time, I think for any business, as you continue to grow, you will take an organic approach, probably for the first several years, as you build your business.
Yeah.
But at some point, that organic approach will have to convert over into some sort of paid approach.
Mm.
Like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so how and when and exactly what that is right now is very unknown to me. um
Yeah. Two things you brought up that I think are interesting. One, the concept of a plateau. I like to look at those as like stair steps, specific, and
sure.
this might sound like semantics and whatnot, but I think about like when I was learning guitar or any craft I was trying to hone. Like what you're talking about, it's the same in business.
Hmm.
There's gonna you're hopefully, if you're drawing that line over time, you're moving up,
Hmm.
right?
Yep.
But you hit these moments where you're like, okay, it feels like we've stagnated, or we're not moving up the way that we want to see, because we're not even
Hmm.
sure where we are on that graph, right? But I think if you think of it as stair steps and not necessarily a plateau, because to me a plateau suggests like a
Sure.
pinnacle of something,
Hmm.
and it's not necessarily always the case. Like there can be plenty more juice to get out of something if you squeeze in a different way, or
Sure.
whatever. A lot of times it's that changing of the perspective, or that rocking of the boat that becomes necessary. Sometimes you got to kind of upset the apple cart to really kind of have the perspective to figure out what the next step for growth is along the way.
Mm-hmm.
It's there's so much of this is just like talking in the ephemeral, like but it is a process that is gonna, and it feels like crap a lot of the time, right? When you stagnate.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that personally for me, that I think look at as like the next challenge is like you mentioned marketing. To me, I would take it a step further, is like allocating a specific budget
Yeah.
item to new things that I haven't had to in the past. Because like
Mm-hmm.
you've said, when you're first getting started, you can kind of work off the goodwill of like you're the newcomer and people want to support what you're doing. They like your story and stuff, but like
Yeah.
you're not. We all grow out of being a baby, and we lose our cuteness right after a
Yep.
while. Right? That's kind of the metaphor. And so what we didn't used to have to pay money for, now we have to pay money for it. And I have
Mm-hmm.
no idea how much I should be budgeting or allocating. And that feels like a tough commitment, right? To take a tranche of money and say, this is only going to be for marketing, and this is
Mm-hmm.
only going to be for, events and
Yep.
whatever else it might be. Because I'm scared, like, well, I might need that money for something else, right? Like, I don't like, we don't want to be committal to things a lot of the time. Like, why is it against human nature to want to like commit to things that way?
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, it's one of those. It's a very interesting aspect. I mean, I know that being bootstrapped, where every penny at the beginning mattered. Like we were counting, 10 cents, for things. To now where we're planning on going to several big shows, and the you know thousands of dollars now. That we're talking multiple thousands of dollars
Yeah,
just to get into the door.
right.
um you know is it's a big change. And it's like, well, we know what that money was useful for to get us here, like, and all of the hard work it took. So like being an entrepreneur, it's one of those interesting things where it gives you a better, I guess, understanding of the value of that dollar. But in terms of committing to it, like, I think, again, this is one of those things where it's an unknown thing, and it's, in many cases, we just have to become more understanding to that committing process.
Yeah.
And then as we start committing, it starts becoming easier and easier to commit to other things.
Yeah.
um you know
For me, a lot of it was like looking at the business bank account with a completely different set of eyes than my personal. Like
hmm
that is the hardest thing as a bootstrapped individual, because it all feels like, well, this is my money. It's going out there and stuff. But like the exercise of, I
hmm
don't want to say like learning not to care as much. I
that's
don't know.
exactly it.
I don't know what, which sounds like I don't want it to sound naive or you know, um, like something that
Yeah.
I just don't care about money, like irresponsible. I'm not trying to
Yeah.
advocate for being irresponsible, but like in some ways, like you have to trust that money does come back to you, but the time frame that
hmm
it's not an immediate one-to-one correlation of like I get my paycheck, I spend my paycheck on my stuff, and then I get my next paycheck.
Yeah.
A lot of these seeds that we're planting don't bear fruit for years sometimes,
It
and
could be
like I
years.
have no
I
idea if
mean,
I'm going to be here in a year or two, right? Like,
yeah. Yeah, literally. And I mean, it's interesting because you have this understanding of, again, how much it took to get that dollar as the business, like all of the work that you had to put in to get that $1 out of a customer. And then to give it up, so for something else, it's like you don't want to let that go. But at that same time, it, it as we are venturing out, like, things that I've learned firsthand here is that this is a big unknown. It was a big bet. Like, our first trip to open source was a massive bet.
yeah,
Like, and it made me sick to my stomach.
yeah.
And I am one of the biggest risk takers that I know in
Just
terms of
pop
these
that
sorts of things.
Dramamine, man. Just like, yeah,
You
whatever.
know,
Yeah, yeah,
and like, thankfully it
yeah,
paid off.
yeah.
but and it wasn't an immediate payoff. It took 6 months, if not more.
Well,
But
and it's tough
you
because it's
know,
like we need those wins in order to like solidify
hmm
our stance and our fortitude for the whole thing, right?
yeah,
So you
hmm
have to allow yourself the time to that, and it's gonna feel. I've said this before. I'll say it again. You're gonna have like a series of just like I feel like I'm all in, and then I'm all in again, and I'm all in again. I mean, it's like
yeah,
that is what and any step along the way, if you're wrong, it feels like you can just lose your entire bankroll, and then it's like, okay,
hmm
what do we do now?
yep,
One of Frank Ippolito owns Thingergy down in L.A., and he had a
hmm
moment. I think he told, I don't remember if he said it on our podcast or not, but he's like, hey man, I've been like scaled up and then down to one like 3 different times, and I was like, whoa, that was mind blowing to me. Like he's had 30 employees, and then it's been just him, and then it's been 30, and I mean that is partly the industry that he's in, and he
hmm
he knows that, and so and a lot of what's comfortable I think in that space is that it's very common in the entertainment industry that you work
hmm
when there's work and you don't when you don't, and it's not a lot of the people that you're working with in the prop building industry and union is union, and it's not contract, but it's project basis. I guess it is contract. It's project basis.
yeah,
So
hmm
that at least allowed him a level of comfort to be like, look, we don't have work right now, and everybody's like, cool, I'm going to go off and do another project. But the risk of that is that
hmm
would drive me insane, right? Because it's just like
yes,
I want to
very
work
much
with
so.
these people that I've spent time like training on my process and how we do that, and if they're not available, like that feels like
hmm
a waste of that training. That feels like a high turnover thing, and that would be very high stress. So maybe you can thrive well in that environment, maybe you can't. I don't know, but people do it.
hmm yeah.
And the journey is different for every little step along the way, isn't it?
Every single thing is going to be different to everyone.
Every
Yeah.
type of business, every type of
Mm.
business. Um, the amount of time we could spend talking about the unknowns, because it just there's
hmm
inevitably more unknowns than that which is known uh,
Yeah.
out there. We have trained our minds to just not focus on a lot of that stuff, and I think that's good. But the
hmm
moral of the story today, ladies and gentlemen, is that it's not all bad to rock the boat sometimes, to feed your need to explore. For me, I do it because like it's what like makes me whole as a maker a lot of the time. Like it may not even be a very profitable thing, but if like it keeps me energized and healthy mentally,
hmm
so that I can be invested in everything else I do, like then that's worth it. And so I think being honest with yourself about like it is okay to have some passion projects along the way that might not necessarily be like the most beneficial to the
hmm
business, because it benefits you and allows you to grow and hone your craft in a different way.
hmm
And I don't think we give ourselves nearly enough credit for that exploration.
Yep.
Final words from you, my friend. Advice for others out there, if you feel so inclined.
I mean, I would say, yeah, just you know, it's not as bad as it might seem once you get used to it. The water might seem cold and brisk at first, but once you get in, it's you build up a tolerance to it pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's not
Um,
warm. You just build a tolerance to the
you
cold
just build a
plunge.
tolerance, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So I would say, in many cases, if you have a business that you're building, whether it's a side hustle, or you've got several employees, is challenge yourself to start figuring out what those unknown unknowns are. Venture out, whether it's a new product, whether it's a potential threat to the business,
Yeah.
whether it's what are you going to do with this thing at the end of its road.
Right.
In many cases, what this is it's an exercise for you to get better at figuring out what it is that you want out of this. Because we say this all the time, is whenever you're starting this, sit down, plan out, ask yourself, what is it that you want out of this venture that you're trying to go down
Yeah.
to. So
And in the spirit of talking about the planning point and the points of resistance, I think that feels like a big a chore to a lot of people. I
Mhm.
don't want to have to sit down and do my planning and stuff like that. Get a napkin. I mean, there's a reason like people do napkin sketches on stuff and whatnot. Like, just
Mhm.
grab whatever's in front of you, even if you don't save it. Just snap a photo of it on your phone or whatever. Like, just jot some notes down. Like, it's not. It doesn't
Mhm.
have to be a big thing, but
Yep.
like, allow yourself 5 minutes of just like alone time with your thoughts on something, because just putting some reasonable guardrails around it
Mhm.
will be all the focus you need to get started a lot of the time, right? It's like, I'm just not going to
Yep.
venture outside of here or here. That leaves a lot of room for in between. So I don't know if that makes sense, but like I said, try to make it digestible chunks, things that are you're not gonna talk yourself out of. Like, know thyself. Do
Mhm.
that exercise when you are at your best. It might be in the morning, it might be when you're in the shower, or whatever it is. All right, that's enough preaching to people out there. We thank you guys for tuning in to this episode. If you liked it, bring a friend sometime. And we hope that we see you again. I appreciate all of you in the chat. Please feel free to hit us up on social media. We're both on Twitter. Our handles are down below. I'm referring
Mhm.
to our YouTube stream where we do this just about every Friday. I am at Repkord, Repkord. Andrew is at 3D Gloop, GLOOP. And we love hearing from you guys. So thank you so much, everybody. Have a great rest of your Friday and a happy weekend to you. And we'll catch you on the next one. Till then,
See ya.
bye bye.